The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. For our friend Rich Sheridan, president of Menlo Innovations, a software development company based in Ann Arbor, the word joy is not just a branding gimmick or a simplistic turn of phrase to differentiate his ideas about leadership. It's an authentic state of being. Just a few minutes into a conversation with Rich, you can hear the joy in his voice and feel the passion he has for infecting others with a joy for work and life. Rich has been a friend of Barry-Wehmiller for quite a while, since around the time his first book, Joy, Inc., was released. Mary Rudder, Barry-Wehmiller's director of communications, and I accompanied our CEO, Bob Chapman, on a trip to Ann Arbor to see Menlo firsthand. Rich's second book was recently released. It's called Chief Joy Officer: How Great Leaders Elevate Human Energy and Eliminate Fear. It's a deeper dive into the leadership lessons Rich has learned and how they are put into practice at Menlo. We greatly encourage you to pick up a copy. You can find out more at menloinnovations.com or follow Rich on Twitter at MenloPrez. Mary and I had a conversation with Rich about his new book, how it's different than his first, whether Menlo actually has a Chief Joy Officer, and why joy? How did joy become the phrase that defined his outlook on leadership and life? Here's Rich Sheridan.
Yeah, it is a fun word. I don't think it's a word we would often hear in the context of business, for sure. But it's such a human word. It speaks, I think, to the core of our humanity. And I don't think most of us get to joy at work. And I certainly wanted to in my earlier career, and I didn't. And now that I have, I tangibly know what it means to have joy in the context of work. And so I wanted to pick a word that really spoke to me first and foremost. And it's this idea of serving others. That to me, joy is actually derived from serving others with the work of our hearts, our hands, and our minds. And I think when we don't get to joy at work, we trade away for something less meaningful. It might be a title or a paycheck or a parking spot or an office by the window or something like that. But what we really want in our work lives is to delight the people we intend to serve. And if we get to do that regularly and systematically, we get to joy in the context of work. And for me, that was the part I wanted in my early career and was denied. And then later, when I finally got to it, I realized how meaningful it really is to see your work get out into the world and delight the people it's intended to serve.
When did you see that in your career? What was the event that happened where you realized it was possible?
Yeah, I was in a dark spot, I guess, not too dark, but dark enough that I just didn't even want to be in my industry anymore, the software industry. A lot of people think we're the sort of shining star industry, right? We're the future, there's software and everything. But what those who are not in the industry don't realize is how often we in the software industry fail without delivering anything. Or if we do deliver something, it's really poor quality. And we frustrate end users in that. And I didn't want that. And I kept searching. I kept trying to figure out what's a better way of doing things than is customary. And despite what I saw were these challenges in my career, I kept getting promotions. It was really weird. They kept, rewarding me, saying, "You're doing a great job." And I knew in my heart I wasn't. I was probably doing better than most. So comparatively speaking, I was doing well. But in 1999, I was a VP of R&D at a company on the west side of Ann Arbor called Interface Systems, and I transformed the team I led, and ultimately that corporation, to a new way of working, and the results that we began producing, I finally started to sense that I'd gotten to the place I'd always wanted to be. And I didn't use the word joy right away, although we put it into, when we started Menlo in 2001, we literally put the word into our mission statement. But it was intriguing to me that the catalyst for actually kind of publicly talking about joy was based on somebody who connects to you so deeply, and that's Simon Sinek. When his TEDx talk, Start With Why, came out, somebody sent it to me and said, "Rich, you do this." And I listened to it and I thought, nah, I don't really do what Simon is exhorting, this idea of starting with why. And so when I dug in and decided, what is our why? I looked back at our mission statement, and there it was, just waiting for me. This idea that we could return joy to technology. And at that point, it just all became crystal clear. Why we exist, what we believe, how we manifest that in terms of how we do things. And so around about 2010, about 9 years into the company, we started specifically talking about joy in the context of work.
Do you guys actually have a chief joy officer at Menlo?
We don't. No. That's probably maybe the one confusing part of the title is it's more of a state of mind. It's more of a presence of leadership. And so, no, my business card won't say Chief Joy Officer. There's no one person in charge of all the joy at Menlo and, creating spreadsheets of, joy, ledgers and all that sort of thing.
Well, I think I saw on Twitter this weekend, I think you were kind of engaged back and forth with somebody that seemed kind of skeptical, and it seemed that they maybe had a notion that you had codified this idea of a chief joy officer.
Yeah, and I as you saw in that exchange, which I thought was a good one, she's in Zurich, Switzerland, so I thought that was fun all by itself. But she was, I think rightfully so, expressing her skepticism, because I'm sure, we all see that kind of stuff going on everywhere. And, you find out that the company that was talking about joy has these horrible things that happen inside of it. And I certainly don't want that here at Menlo. But what I told her and what we're expressing here in this conversation is that joyful leadership needs to come from everywhere. Anyone can lead. You don't have to have a title to lead. It is more of an ability to influence others towards a good outcome and get them to follow you to creating that good outcome. And that leadership can come from anywhere in the organization.
Your first book, Joy Inc., was a little bit different than this current book. Kind of walk us through what the differences are and why you decided you wanted to write a second book.
Yeah, Joy Inc. was more kind of call it the 50,000-foot view of the entirety of Menlo. The subtitle there is How We Built a Workplace People Love. And, what are the processes and the practices that foster all of Menlo? But there was one chapter in the book that really caught people's attention for a couple of different reasons. Probably even where, you guys at Barry-Wehmiller and Menlo are so heart-to-heart connected. And that was this idea of one chapter was titled Growing Leaders, Not Bosses. And I think that was, for me, when I listened to Bob speak about sort of his moments of, this kind of recrafting his own view of how management should work, I think it's in the same spirit. And what people ultimately found out about us and were intrigued by is that we don't have bosses here. We have leaders, but no bosses. So we don't have a hierarchical structure. There are no reporting relationships. You don't have a boss you sit down with for an annual performance review. And of course, when I started revealing that in my talks around the world, questions started arising. How would that work? How does that not devolve into chaos? How do you make decisions? How do you make decisions quickly and all that sort of thing? So people wanted to understand, how does leadership work in a bossless environment, in a non-hierarchical environment? And so that was really the springboard for Chief Joy Officer, is what does leadership look like, or what even could it look like in other organizations? And And I want to be very careful here. I treated this in the book as well. I didn't want to come out with a statement that maybe some business books do, where bosses are bad and leaders are good, because I've had great bosses, I've had good bosses, and I've had bad bosses. And I see the same thing on the leadership front. You can have bad leaders too. So I try and, I don't try and tell the world you shouldn't have bosses. We just happen to not have them. And that's not the most important thing. It's more important, though, to understand that leadership, whether you're a boss or you're not, comes through influence, not the I told you to do this, so you got to do it because I'm the boss kind of stuff. Because you'll get people to follow you when you're the boss who won't bring their hearts along, won't bring their minds along. And then we'll get to those disengagement statistics that everybody talks about.
So in your career, obviously you drew upon this to write this book. What are the things that made those good leaders good?
Yeah, I break the book into two pieces. One is the values of a joyful leader. And, best put, maybe the question I didn't ask in the book is, what makes a leader worth following? Why would I follow another person? And I kind of went through what I've seen, not just here at Menlo, but over the course of my career. The kinds of people we want to follow are people who are authentic, who are humble, who are loving and optimistic and visionary, but yet grounded in reality, and who also have understood that once you rise into serious leadership, it is about serving others, not serving yourself, which, again, back to our friend Simon Sinek, when he says leaders eat last, I think that's such a great statement about what does it mean to be a servant leader. And then the second part of the book is, okay, great, you have those values. What does the system of joyful leadership look like? How would you build such a system within your own organization?
There's one part in your book that I think is really, it's a really good use of metaphor. We talk about leadership. We talk about a caring leadership, about how leaders should care and need to care. I think you use a different kind of way of saying it in terms of being loving. And at one point in the book, you say, one of your core tenets is that in your leadership life is that love wins every time. And then you go on in this chapter to compare leadership to a pretty commonly quoted Bible verse. You're not quoting it in terms of in a religious connection or anything. It's a verse that people use in very secular weddings all the time. But kind of walk through how you use that verse to describe leadership and kind of capture what leadership is.
Yeah, and let me read the verse because I think it's just so impactful, right? And as you say, probably almost every wedding you go to, regardless of religion or secularity, they will often use this because it speaks so much to the heart of, I think, what it means to be a real human being. And it says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It protects, trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And as I was writing this chapter, I thought you could pull out the word love and put in leaders, and these are the kind of leaders we want to follow. Leaders who are patient, leaders who are kind, leaders who do not envy and are not proud and do not dishonor others and are not self-seeking and are not easily angered and do not keep a record of wrongs and do not delight in evil but rejoice in the truth. And when I started writing that, I can remember where I was when I was writing this, and it just flowed so easily. At that point, I knew I was hooked into something pretty basic about leadership.
Basic, but also kind of hard to do all the time. I mean, when I listen to that, I'm a leader. Am I doing that all the time for my team? Yikes.
I'm not, believe me, and nobody here is. We're all human. And that's one of the things I try and remind people of is You are not going to be that person your dog thinks you are. Certainly not every minute of every day. And so we have to understand that all of this stuff happens in the context of being a regular person who's got stuff going on in their lives at home and their relationships, family members who might be ill or just a sleepless night, and you're going to come in and you're going to have a bad day, and that doesn't make you a bad leader. And so I think we can aspire. We can hope to be a better version of ourselves every day, but we also have to let ourselves off the hook and say, you know what, it's okay to acknowledge that we're regular human beings.
So you have been speaking to lots of groups over the years since your first book came out. What are you finding out there? What have you been experiencing?
Well, I will tell you, when the first book came out and I looked at it, you know, just sort of like I look at this one today because it's launching today. And I looked and said, oh, Rich, really? You wrote a business book that has the words joy and love on the cover, and you expect to be taken seriously. And I wondered, you know, much like we were talking about earlier, that skepticism of the young lady in Zurich who was interacting with me on Twitter. And I get it, of course. I mean, you know, the world in some ways should be skeptical given all the things we see from time to time. And I thought, I don't know, will people shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, whatever, or will they take it seriously, or will they laugh it off, or something like that? And I had no idea the depth to which people would grab hold, pull me in, and say, tell me more. I've had people write me and say, Rich, I read your Joy Inc. book, and as soon as I hit the last page, I went back to the beginning and I read it again, and I did it 3 times. I've never done that with a book in my life. And you know, and then when I speak to groups, I knew I had connected with this one audience in Berlin, a set of German software engineers, and I had male German engineers come up to me in tears after the talk, and I thought, okay, I struck a nerve here. This is important. This is what people are looking for in their work lives.
Mm-hmm. So did you write it out of, you know, a desire to educate that group, or did you know, what I'm asking is, are things changing?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. My favorite story so far that I tell in Chief Joy Officer is Mass Mutual Corporation, who bought the book. Some of them came on tours here because we get about 3,000 to 4,000 people a year come see us every year. And then they invited me in to speak to their leadership team, about 300 people up in Massachusetts. And I talked about the lessons of Joy Inc. And they invited me back 6 months later. Now, Mass Mutual Corporation is about a 170-year-old life insurance company. So this is as big as it gets. This is as old as it gets. And it's probably, to be just a little bit cynical, probably as bureaucratic as it gets as a life insurance company, for goodness sakes. And they invited me back 6 months after my talk to say, Rich, we want to show you what's happened in the last 6 months. And it was magical. I can't even begin to describe that day and how it made me feel, based on the fact that, you mean you could write a book and give a talk and then this could happen inside of a 170-year-old company? Holy cow. And one of my favorite stories about that visit was they took me back to the claims processing center, and I had sort of encouraged them to develop a mindset of run the experiment, you know, try stuff, become action oriented. And they took hold of that and ran with it. And we went into claims processing, and Amy Ferrero, who's their VP of claims, said, Rich, everywhere someone's running an experiment, the person there has taped a helium balloon to their desk, both to declare I'm running an experiment and to invite you to speak to them about their experiment. And I'm looking at this, and we walk in, and there are balloons as far as the eye can see, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I tell the story of Erica in the book, but I don't tell the story of Susan. And I think the story of Susan is just as impactful. I walk up to Susan's desk and I said, Susan, so you're running an experiment. Tell me about it. And she said, yeah. She says, I'm in charge of quality control around claims. And we have this 3-step process, step 1, 2, and 3. And she said, I realized in this 3-step process that step 2 is the hardest step. But if we get to step 3 and we find an error, we have to actually go back and redo step 2. So she said, my idea, my experiment was, let's do step 3 second and push this hardest step to the last. Now, you can, in that sounds pretty simple, right? And she is just beaming to tell me about this. And I'm like, wow. And I said, Susan, have you always, I asked her, I said, how long have you worked here? She said, 19 years. And she's just like almost wiggling in her seat. She's so happy to tell me about all this. And I said, Susan, have you always been like this? And she looks at me, she says, oh no. She says, I hated my job. I hated coming to work every day. I said, really? I said, what's the difference? She said, well, let me tell you, Rich, in the old days, if I had an idea like this, it had to go up 5 levels, over, down 5 levels. Every idea I had died on the vine before it got back to me. So after a while, you just stop bringing new ideas to work. And after a while, you just say, well, that's just the way it is around here. We're not going to change. And she says, now we can run the experiment. Now I get to try things like this. She looks at me, she says, I love my job. I love coming to work every day. And I thought, wow, in that story, imagine the possibilities, right? We want to flip the disengagement statistics from 70% disengaged to 70% engaged. This is what it's going to look like. And imagine what we're getting essentially for free. Right? Susan already worked there. She already had a paycheck. She already had a title, an office, computer equipment. She already had a parking spot out in the parking lot. And now she's coming to work saying, I love my job.
How drastic were the changes that they needed to make for that to happen?
I don't think they were drastic at all. This is the amazing thing, right? Amy doesn't set up like a bureaucracy for the Council on Experimentation. She goes gets a tank of helium and a bunch of Mylar balloons and she says, hey guys, we're going to establish this new culture here. We're going to run experiments. And I don't know exactly how it all started, but she's like, anybody who decides to run an experiment, I just want you to fill up a helium balloon, tape it to your desk so we can come and ask you what you're working on. And that was it. And all of a sudden they got like 100 helium balloons in the claims processing area. And it's like, oh my gosh. So the beautiful thing is this doesn't have to be like complicated and procedures and committees and bureaucracy. This can be as simple as helium balloons.
It's amazing how infectious joy can be when it's, authentically felt, how infectious that can be. Absolutely. Afterward.
I love the Barry-Wehmiller story where Bob takes down the chain link fence around the tools area and says, guys, we trust you. You're not going to steal our tools. Just go use the tools. Think about how easy that was. It was probably mind-blowing for some people who are in charge of, inventory or something like that and had a mindset. That's the hard thing to change is your mindset, right? We trust our people. We can't trust our people. Like, why wouldn't you? You trust them with everything else they do here. Why would you trust them with this?
So you said the second half of the book is really the, what to do, the actionable steps. What are the first things that, you tell companies to do?
Yeah, I think we are so wired as human beings to be inspired by grand purpose in service to others. I think this is what I think we are basically wired as human beings to work in teams to serve others. And so when I encourage people on their own journey to joy, what I tell them to start with is to answer 2 basic questions about your company, your organization, your team. And it is simply this: whom do we serve? And what would delight look like for them? And this turns us from an inward mindset of what would make me happy I want a good office. I want a good title. I want a ping pong table over in the corner so we can play ping pong at lunch, to, oh, we have to work hard in community with one another to serve people out in the world. And I think that's what drives us as human beings. And I encourage people to think past the normal stakeholder groups everybody talks about, the investors, the employees, and the customers. Look past them. Think about who you serve, who doesn't pay you for what you do. And almost every organization has a version of this. At that life insurance company, I challenge them to think not about their policy holders, but their beneficiaries, people who don't pay them for what they do, who won't meet them for another 40 years until the loved one who had the thoughtfulness to buy a life insurance policy to protect their life partner passes away. And now the beneficiary is calling a company they don't even know, and are expecting, they're calling them in their one of the darkest times of their lives, and they're expecting compassion and understanding and all that sort of thing. So, I think those are the things that drive us as human teams.
Going back to the first part of the book, without giving spoilers out, the first part of the book is a description of what a joyful leader is. And each chapter deals with a different part of that. Which one of those characteristics do you struggle with the most as a leader?
Oh, now you're asking the hard question. I love it. It's funny. I think that anybody around here who knows me well would probably not be surprised by saying humble is hard. Humble's really hard. Especially when you're the guy with the name on the books and you're the CEO and you're the person that's getting out to go speaking around the world about these topics. Hanging on to that humility part can be really difficult.
So how do you stay humble? How do you keep grounded and keep that in perspective?
Yeah, I have a tradition here that probably most of the team wouldn't even recognize because they're not here when I'm doing it. And that is, I start the day, I'm often the first one here. I was this morning. Turn on all the lights, walk the space, collect up dirty coffee cups, put them in the dishwasher, and empty the dishwasher. Start the first pot of coffee. Those kind of simple things keep me connected to the actual functioning of the company. I actually think about putting the clean cups back in the cupboard and thinking about the team members who will come and grab them later and be appreciative of the fact that there's clean cups. And so I try and balance my life between the heady things I get to do that I get a lot of recognition for, and just the normal things of life that can keep us connected to everybody who works for us and around us. I try and say good morning to everybody who walks in the door and call them out by name, just to, again, have them each recognize that I care about them as a person. One extra thing that is so natural to me now, I don't even think about it anymore. And, this pertains to both my co-founder and I. We sit out in the room with everybody else. We don't have corner offices. We don't have gifted C-suites. There's no barrier between us and the rest of the team. And we've always been comfortable with the notion that our team gets to decide where our tables are. We don't get to choose. We could if we wanted to, if we had a strong opinion about it. But our view is the team probably knows better than we do where we could either A, produce the greatest benefit, which is how I like to think about things, or B, the least amount of harm, which is probably how they think about things.
Well, we've talked a lot about the main point of the book, which is how to foster joy and encourage joy as a leader in the workplace and an organization. But it's probably worthwhile talking a little bit about the antithesis of joy, which I would think would be fear.
Yep.
How is fear the enemy of joy? How is fear the opposite of that?
Yeah, and I think we can get into almost basic human physiology when we talk about these two things. If joy is one of the most human emotions there is and puts us in that greatest part of our human condition, which I attribute humanity to creativity, innovation, invention, imagination. I think those are the places where, we humans will always outpace AI and machines and the rest of everything that surrounds us. Fear puts us into reptile mode. Fear puts us into fight or flight mode. Fear causes our body to release adrenaline and cortisol, and it shuts down the part of our brain that makes us the most human. And now we're in, I'm geared up for a battle. I'm geared up for a fight. My heart's racing. My breath is shallow. I'm ready to engage in something that could be life-threatening. And if we operate in fearful mode, we will lose all those wonderful things that can produce joy in the world.
It seems like a lot of leaders use fear. We hear that a lot when we talk to people about leaders that they've had in the past that have made a bad impression on them. What is it about fear that's easy for some leaders, or whatever you want to call them, managers, to use as a go-to for control or as a style of governance?
Fear is expedient. Fear is fast. Look, if I noticed a fire in the corner here at Menlo, I should jump out in the room, yell out in the most authoritative and commanding voice I possibly can, fire, and everybody will be afraid. But sure as shooting, they're going to get out of their desks, they're going to leave their stuff behind, they're going to get out of the room. And I'm guessing there are many, many moments in life when that's the most important thing anybody can do to protect others. I think where fear goes awry is where we get addicted to it as bosses, and we use fear to, and what I call artificial fear, to motivate, right? And I learned from some of the best when I was taught to, as a boss, to not do what Tom Peters said, which is about management by walking around and really getting to know people and understanding them as humans, but management by walking around and annoying people. Walking. I had a boss once said, "Yeah, just you should just make a habit of walking into people's cubes, saying, hey, how's it going? What you working on? Are you almost done? Are you coming in this weekend?" I can tell you, I can feel my blood pressure rising just remembering those moments, and that was probably 30 years ago.
It's the whole office-based thing about the TPS reports.
Absolutely. Yep. And so I had to unlearn those things because, quite frankly, as a budding boss, as I first cracked out of my managerial eggshell for the first time, I did what the ducklings do. I imprinted on the first person I saw, and that person happened to be my boss. And why wouldn't I imprint on that person? They've already demonstrated they have what it takes to be a boss. I want to be a boss someday because I'll make more money and get more, tangible rewards in life and all that kind of stuff. So I should do what they do. I should listen to how they manage me. I should imprint myself on their behaviors. And it took me, I would say I'm still unlearning those behaviors. I'm really good at it. I can manage with fear like nobody else I know. And so I have to really, really guard against that.
Thinking about your book being out in the world now, and flying around out there, what's one of your biggest hopes for it? What's one of your biggest hopes of the impact that it'll have?
When James and I started the company in 2001, we were determined to share what we learned with the world. We didn't want to keep it to ourselves. We picked a big, hairy, audacious goal, as they like to say, to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And it became, it was instantly clear to us, there's no way we can do that by ourselves. So we're going to take an opportunity to teach others how we do what we do and why we do it the way we do it and what results it can affect. And so for us in teaching, and of course, I even talk about this in the book, teaching is leading, and leaders are teachers, but leaders also are students. Leaders stay in student mode. They are readers. They are students. They are always curious and learning from others. And that's one of the most delightful things about teaching is if you keep yourself open, if you don't think you have all the answers, when all these thousands of people come in to learn from us, they're asking us hard questions. They're telling us about their lives. They're telling us about what they've tried, and we learn from them. So it's a nice sort of giver and taker kind of blend where we get from those we give to, and we get better, which means we can teach others what we've learned. And so our heart has always been to share what we've learned with the world in the hopes that we can make the world a better place than we found it. James and I both come from a Boy Scout background, and one of the things that you learn as a Boy Scout is leave the campsite better than you found it. And for us, now the campsite we're trying to leave better than we found it is planet Earth. And the way we've chosen to do it is to one at a time, one after another, the leaders who come to us, the companies we visit, the companies we work with directly, can we not only do work for them, but can we leave behind a better company than we found it, a better team than we found it, a better organization than we found it?
You're one of a number of people that are doing that same thing. Is it working?
Absolutely it is. Is it working as fast as we thought? Nope. This is hard. Changing human behavior is the hardest thing to change on planet Earth. There's just no question that we are on a mission that's hard. We're building a cathedral. I use that analogy in the book. But when you take the vision of building a cathedral, you have to understand, and I know Bob probably understands this as well as everybody in your world, that you're not going to be done before you pass on. The best thing you can do is simply set a course, set a trend, set a direction, and hopefully that those that follow you, those you've touched, whose lives you've touched along the way, will carry it on long after you're gone.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.